The story begins with our protagonist named Ein, who was born as a worthless appraiser, and it has led to a life of constant misery. He can barely make a living for himself and is constantly mistreated by those around him. So now that he's on the edge of death's door, he decides to take the plunge and get it over with. A few hours earlier, Ein was in a party with the mage Jolene and the swordsman Zoid. He's currently up against your average New York City rat, and he manages to slash it, but it's not enough to take the rat down, so he yells for Jolene to hurry up with her spell. And once she's finally done, she fires it at the rat, killing it in a single blow. Now that they are done with their battle, Zoid and Jolene begin praising each other for a job well done. However, they are nowhere near as nice when speaking to the appraiser they brought along with them, Ein. Zoid yells for Ein to hurry up and do his job already, but all the heavy baggage she's carrying combined with the weight of their insults makes it difficult to move, so Ein ends up falling face first to the ground. He's clearly being mistreated, but even so he has no choice but to get up and obediently do his job as a low common appraiser. At birth, all the people in this world are granted jobs by the goddess of light and skills by the goddess of darkness. By honing these skills, one can gain a multitude of abilities and powers. However, jobs are passed down genetically, so they can never be changed. These jobs are divided into tiers: rare, high common, and low common. And as you can see, low common is bronze tier trash, so most people with this class are stuck as peasants or merchants. Ein's parents used to own a small appraisal shop to support the family, but they both tragically died when Ein was young, so he was left to fend for himself. That's how he ended up becoming an unglorified pack mule for these two, and even though he hates working for them, he's got no choice. He uses his appraisal skill on the rat they killed and finds out that it's an F-rank rat, so it's pretty much worthless. Although its tooth is D rank, so it's valuable enough for Ein to pick up. He tries to pry the rat's mouth open so he can remove the tooth, but that jaw isn't budging, so this is going to take a while. Zoid and Jolene are starting to get impatient since Ein is taking so long, so Ein asks them for a little help so he can get the rat's mouth open quickly. However, Zoid is offended that Ein would even dare to ask for help, so he throws a rock at him and tells Ein that he's worthless. Ein glares at Zoid with rage in his eyes for what he just did, but unfortunately, Ein doesn't have the strength to back that rage, so Zoid just kicks him across the floor and Ein is forced to apologize and beg for mercy. Zoid doesn't feel like beating Ein up anymore, so he gets back to work trying to pry the rat's jaws open, while Jolene and Zoid mock him for being a filthy trash collector. They really enjoyed making fun of him, and they know he can't do anything about it since there aren't any jobs for an appraiser like him. If someone wanted to figure out the value of an item, they could easily go to the guild and have it appraised with a magic item. So low-level appraisers like Ein are totally obsolete. Ein heard everything those two just said about him, and he knows they are right. His appraisal skill is practically worthless, so the only job he can get is scavenging parts for jerks like Jolene and Zoid. As soon as Ein has stored the tooth in his bag, Zoid reminds Ein that the only reasons they even agree to have him in their party is because Zoid gates touch and gross stuff like that, so he had better learn his place and behave like a good trash boy. Life dealt Ein a bad hand, but he's got to do whatever it takes to survive in this world, even if it means he must suffer at the hands of those two. As they are walking through the dungeon, Zoid happens to spot a hellhound corpse lying in the middle of the path, and he doesn't even question it. He thinks this is incredibly lucky since they can loot it without him having to fight, so he orders Ein to start looting. However, Ein has a functioning brain and raises the good point that if the hellhound was already dead before they got here, then something strong must have killed it. And on top of that, hellhounds aren't even supposed to spawn in this area of the dungeon, so he is sure something is seriously wrong here. However, Zoid doesn't want to hear any logical arguments from a loser like Ein, so he tells him to shut up and get to work already. While Ein does the dirty work, Jolene and Zoid begin talking about getting freaky with each other once they get back to town and maybe forcing Ein to watch. But then they notice a second hellhound corpse in the corridor, so they tell Ein to go get that one too. However, this time Ein is frozen in fear because according to the guild map he got, there shouldn't be a corridor here, so he has a bad feeling that something is going to go wrong if they keep going. Yet once again, Zoid completely ignores Ein's logical arguments and starts walking into the corridor. He tells Ein that if he's so scared to continue then he can leave on his own, that he won't be getting paid anymore since he is disobeying an order from the leader. Ein is pretty much cornered here because on one hand he knows something dangerous might be down in that corridor, so he really doesn't want to go, but he also can't afford to be fired from Zoid's party. There are practically no other parties that would be willing to accept a loser with a skill like appraisal, so if Zoid kicks Ein out because of this, he will have no way of surviving, so Ein eventually decides to head into the corridor with Zoid, even though he knows it's a bad idea. After walking through the corridor for a while, they come across a ton of dead hellhounds on the floor, and Zoid thinks they just hit the jackpot since they can loot all these bodies and make a massive profit without having to fight anything. But Ein is still uneasy since whatever killed all these hellhounds might still be around. Zoid is getting sick of all Ein's constant worrying, so he yells at him to shut up and do his job. But then Ein sees something absolutely terrifying behind Zoid, so he nervously points in that direction. Zoid turns around to see dozens of little red eyes staring at them, and a few moments later, a pack of hellhounds emerges from the darkness. All those hellhound bodies they found earlier must have been the result of infighting among the pack. But now that they've been confronted by the full pack, none of them know what to do. Ein has no combat skills, and even if Zoid and Jolene work together, they would barely be able to take down one hellhound, let alone an entire pack, so fighting isn't an option here. The only way they can make it out of this alive is if they make a run for it. But even if they do try to run away, there's no way they can escape a pack of wolves chasing them down. Just then, Zoid realizes that he and Jolene don't necessarily have to be faster than the hounds, they just have to be faster than Ein, so the hounds eat him first. So he tells Jolene to cast a paralysis spell on him. Jolene is confused at first, but she soon figures out what Zoid is trying to do, so she points her staff at Ein and paralyzes him. Ein falls to the floor, unable to move, and he can't believe that the two of them really planned to lead him here to die. But Zoid assures him that the paralysis only lasts for a short time, so if Ein stays quiet, he might get lucky and escape the hellhounds as well. However, Zoid then proceeds to make a lot of noise to attract the hellhounds straight to Ein, and afterwards he runs off with Jolene, leaving Ein to be eaten. The hellhounds pounce on Ein and immediately bite into his arm and leg, so he screams out in pain. But all the pain from being mauled caused the paralysis to wear off, so Ein can once again move and grabs a nearby rock to get the hellhounds off him. He then throws his backpack at them, and while it may not have done any damage, the food inside the backpack was enough of a distraction to buy him some time, so he slowly limps away from the hounds. But unfortunately he discovers that Zoid and Jolene had blocked off the exit, so there really is no way for him to escape. He doesn't have much time before the hounds come after him again, so Ein spots another corridor and starts heading straight for it. But to his dismay, this corridor leads to a massive dead end. All hope seems to have been lost for Ein since he has nowhere to run and he can hear the dogs closing in on him by the second. If he is going to die regardless, Ein would rather fall to his death than be eaten alive by those monsters. Till now, he has always blamed his failures on his trash appraisal job, but now he realizes he never actually tried to overcome the challenges he faced because of his job. But even if he realizes that now, it's too late for him to change anything. A loud thud is heard as Ein's body hits the ground, but while he most certainly died on impact, he happened to land right on top of a tree. A beautiful girl appears before him and slowly walks towards his dead body before giving him a kiss on the forehead. As she does this, Ein's body begins to move again, and after a few moments, he regains consciousness. Once Ein can think clearly again, he realizes that he's still alive and all his injuries have been healed, so he starts wondering how that could even be possible. He notices drops of water falling on him from the tree, so he catches a few and uses his appraised skill to check them. And to his utter shock, these are S-rank droplets of the world tree. He then appraises the giant tree, and sure enough, he discovers that this huge hunk of wood is indeed the world tree of legend. Long ago, this world had a single world tree, and this tree was responsible for producing the mana that humans used to create magic. However, the legend also states that the world tree withered away and died long ago. But many scholars of the world theorize that it must still exist somewhere in the world, which is why massive expeditions were launched in hopes of finding it. But the tree was never found, although it makes sense why no one ever found it, because who would think to search at the bottom of the dungeon? He realizes that the tree must have brought him back to life, so he thanks it, and as he does so, he hears a girl's voice, but there's clearly no one else here, so it must have been his imagination. Moving on, Ein is glad he survived the fall, and this place seems pretty safe since there are no monsters here, but he needs to think about how he's going to get himself back to the surface. Zoid and Jolene obviously aren't going to call anyone to save Ein. Plus, there's no food here, so he will starve if he doesn't make it back home soon. He heads for the exit, but before he leaves, he once again thanks the tree for saving him. This place obviously isn't on the guild map, so Ein has no idea what to expect from this place. The enemies here are bound to be stronger than those hellhounds that nearly killed him, so he's scared, but he has no choice but to go. He's done making excuses for himself and plans to do whatever it takes to survive, no matter how hard it may be. Ein walks out into the dungeon, but to his surprise, he's been walking for a while now and there are still no signs of any monsters. He's honestly relieved since that means he won't have to fight, but suddenly Ein feels a gust of wind near his face. And in the next moment, his ear is on the floor. He screams out in pain and tries reaching for his severed ear, but in the process, 2 of his fingers get cut off. The one behind Ein's suffering is this S-rank gremlin, and Ein is starting to really panic since even those hellhounds were only B rank, so he stands no chance against this thing. The gremlin begins slicing Ein up, and it's way too fast for Ein to even react, so his only choice is to flee. However, as he attempts to get away, the gremlin raises its scythe to stab Ein through the chest. But before it does, it freezes in its tracks because something even more terrifying just appeared. The gremlin gets squished to death by a massive death bear, and if Ein didn't stand a chance against the gremlin, then he most certainly isn't surviving the death bear. The bear slashes Ein's face with its claws, destroying one of his eyes in the process, and while Ein is trying to crawl away, it picks him up and begins squeezing until blood gushes out of his mouth. The death bear was just about to eat him, but at the last second it gets decapitated by a grumpy woman. She gets the fact that she just saved a human, but that girl kept begging her to help him, so she didn't have much of a choice, and he is once again shocked to find that his wounds have been healed. And as he sits up, he sees that girl from before sitting across from him. The story continues. We see Ein is still trying to wrap his head around what he's seeing, but then a woman appears behind him and demands that Ein show proper gratitude and drink the tea that the girl made for him. Ein is confused since he hasn't seen any tea, but then he notices the girl, Yuri, holding a cup of tea that she made specially for him. Ein is hesitant to drink mysterious tea that could potentially contain some body fluid, but Ursula forces it down his throat anyway, so it's not like he had much of a choice. However, it turns out that the tea actually tastes really good, so Ein tells Yuri as much and she's really glad he likes it. Ein thinks Yuri looks really cute when she's happy, but Ursula warns him that she'll erase his entire existence if he has even a single lewd thought about Yuri. Ein gets the message, so moving on, he asks if it was the 2 of them who saved him from the death bear. Ursula tells him she had no interest in protecting a smelly human like him, but Yuri kept begging her to save him, so she had no choice. Ein thanks Yuri for caring about him, and Yuri gets a little embarrassed, so Ursula drop-kicks him in the face and starts stomping him out for flirting with her daughter. Ein is shocked to hear that Ursula is Yuri's mother, but to be more precise, Ursula is actually Yuri's guardian, and it's been that way ever since she first planted her roots here. Yuri may look human, but she's actually this world tree, one of 9 that exist in this world, so Ursula was tasked with watching over her and defending Yuri against any potential threats. Ein is surprised to learn that Yuri is the world tree spirit, but it makes sense to him since she's so beautiful. But immediately after he says that, Yuri gets embarrassed again, so Ursula kicks him to the ground for daring to look at Yuri with such lecherous eyes. Ein apologizes, but speaking of eyes, he realizes that he can still see despite getting one of his eyeballs torn out by the death bear. Ursula explains that she healed him using the tears of the world tree, but even with the healing ability of the tears, they still can't restore a crushed eyeball, so Yuri generously asked her to use part of the world tree to make a new eye for him so he could see. Ein is once again really thankful, but he's starting to wonder why Yuri was so concerned about him in the first place when they barely know each other. She tells him it's because he thanked her when he fell down here. It's rare for people to end up here, but there have still been a handful of incidents of people falling to their doom, and Yuri would always save them, but they would never thank her. And as soon as those people realized that she was the world tree, they would selfishly begin collecting her water, and even tearing off Yuri's branches and leaves so they could sell them for profit. However, Ein was the first person to treat her with respect, so she took a liking to him. But be that as it may, Ein isn't supposed to be here, so Ursula tells him to hurry up and leave. Yuri pleads with Ursula not to kick Ein out since he's bound to die if he heads back into the dungeon, but Ursula doesn't care what happens to him. Yuri does care though, so she pleads with Ursula to at least find a way to guarantee that Ein can make it home safe and sound. However, there really isn't much Ursula can do to help him, since she is the world tree's guardian. She isn't allowed to get too far from the tree, so escorting Ein to the surface isn't really an option. And teleportation magic doesn't work in this dungeon, so she can't use that either. Yuri is devastated that there's no way to keep Ein alive, so she breaks down in tears, but Ursula can't stand to see her cry, so she comes up with an alternative to make sure Ein makes it home safely. She turns to him and yells that she will personally train him until he is strong enough to make it out of here on his own. Yuri thanks Ursula for agreeing to help, and Ein is even more thankful, since he had thought he was going to die here for sure. He hugs both Ursula and Yuri, but Ursula doesn't like all this affection, so she pulls him away and warns him that he's about to receive hellish training from one of the world's greatest sages, so he had better take this seriously since she won't tolerate laziness. Ein understands and swears that he will do his best, but when Ursula leaves him outside so they can begin their training, Ein starts to worry that she might just force him to fight monsters on his own. Just then, Ursula informs him that she indeed expects him to fight monsters on his own, because that's the quickest way for him to learn. To start off, she says she wants him to fight that gremlin way over there, but Ein can't actually see anything in that direction. Ursula reminds him that his eye has been replaced with a piece of the world tree, so he should try making use of it a little. But even with his tree spirit eye, Ein still can't see shit. Ursula tells him he just lacks the awareness of what his spirit eye is truly capable of, so Ein takes a moment to think about how he lost his eye, and how Yuri helped him restore it. And by the time he opens his eyes, everything seems a lot brighter. Now that Ein can finally see clearly, Ursula says it's time for them to begin his training, so she tosses a rock at a nearby gremlin, and tells Ein that his first task will be to learn how to dodge the gremlin's high-speed attacks. Ein doesn't think that's possible since the gremlin is moving way too fast for him to keep track of, but Ursula tells him he just needs to use his appraisal skill to scan the gremlin's movements. Ein doesn't think it works that way, but he doesn't have many options, so he tries it out, and to his surprise, he really can see the gremlin's moves now, although it's pointless if he forgets to dodge. Since Ein is injured, Ursula puts up a barrier and pulls out a bottle of tree drops she borrowed from Yuri. She pours it on Ein's severed ear, and after it has been reattached, she tells him that he had better take this seriously, otherwise he's going to keep getting sliced up. She then drops the barrier and the gremlin attacks him again, but since he knows where it's going to attack, he manages to duck out of the way in time. After a week of constant training, Ein has finally gotten the hang of appraising the gremlin's moves and can dodge its attack every single time. He proudly tells Ursula that he has mastered the technique, but in the process he lets his guard down so the gremlin is able to sneak up from behind and slashes his back. Ursula creates a shield around the two of them so they can take a break, and she gets a good laugh from seeing Ein's pain. But she admits that he did do a good job at dodging, so she says he has passed the first test. Now they'll move on to the next lesson, so she tells Ein that he has to defeat that gremlin. Ein is willing to try, but he doesn't have a combat job, so killing an S-rank monster will be impossible for him. Ursula already thought of that, and while it certainly would be impossible for Ein if he were fighting with his bare hands, he doesn't have to since Ursula made a special sword for him. Ursula didn't want to make this for him, but Yuri went through all the trouble of snapping off one of her branches because she wanted to help him. Ein is deeply touched that Yuri would put herself through such pain just to help him, so he is really grateful and swears to make good use of it. Ursula undoes the barrier and leaves Ein to face the gremlin, but when he tries to strike at it, the gremlin easily dodges him. Ursula jokes that he's never going to hit the gremlin if he swings so slowly, and Ein is aware of that, so he decides to just predict the gremlin's path and attack it when it gets close to him. However, when he tries to do that, the gremlin just jumps over him because it's not stupid. If it sees Ein try to attack it, it's obviously going to try to dodge, so Ein needs to think of a new strategy. Instead of simply appraising the gremlin's movements to predict its attacks, Ein needs to appraise every facet of the attack itself, so he digs deep and performs his super appraisal as the gremlin charges at him. As he does this, the gremlin seems to freeze in time. But in reality, Ein is just seeing it move in slow motion since his eye is appraising it at such a high speed. And with such a clear view of the gremlin's movements, Ein is easily able to prepare himself and whack it in the face, finally defeating it. Ein is really happy that he just defeated his first monster, but Ursula reminds him that now isn't the time to be celebrating since he's just getting started. For the next part of their training, she tells Ein that he has to defeat over a dozen more gremlins, and Ein is confident that he can handle it, so he gets right to work. After several hours of fighting, Ein is finally done taking out all the gremlins, so he turns to Ursula, expecting to be praised. But she says this much should be normal for someone who can harness the power of a world tree. With that said, Ein has been making steady progress so far, so she thinks he is ready for the next step. She tells him to appraise the gremlin's ability and make it his own, but Ein doesn't understand what she means since appraisal only shows him information about skills. Ursula points out that humans learn skills through constant practice, and with his spirit eye, Ein should be able to see not only the information of the skill, but also receive all the experience that comes with it. With this method, it is possible for him to learn a skill instantly, so he decides to try it out and appraises the gremlin's skills. Just then, Ein gets a massive headache as a ton of information rushes into his head all at once. He falls to his knees in pain, but once the headache finally subsides, he acquires the gremlin's high-speed movement skill. He still finds it hard to believe that he learned a skill so quickly, so he decides to test it a little and takes off running down the dungeon hall. Ein is amazed by how fast he's moving, since he's way quicker than he used to be, but there's just one problem. His body isn't used to running at this speed, so after a few seconds, every muscle fiber in his body is way torn to pieces. Ursula catches up to him and pours some of the teardrops to heal Ein's broken body. If his body can't handle all that force right now, then he's just going to have to keep practicing until he eventually adapts. Ein's muscle fibers keep tearing each time he runs, but thanks to the tears, Ursula just keeps healing him over and over, until at one point his muscles stop breaking altogether. He now has a strong body and an acceleration skill, so Ein wonders if he might be strong enough to challenge the Death Bear as he is now, but Ursula tells him he'd still get demolished if he tried to pick a fight with it as he is now. He may be faster and nimble, but he still lacks the necessary attack power, so Ursula decides to let him copy one of her own abilities. Ein is excited to hear this, so he asks Ursula what her ability is, and she demonstrates by immediately blasting him with a fireball. Ursula's ability is called Discard Enchant, and it allows her to use magic without needing to spend time on a chant. Ein thinks that ability is super strong, so he can't wait to learn it, but Ursula will only allow him to appraise it if he does it while she launches a fireball in him because she thinks it's fun. Ein appraises the attack and manages to learn the discard enchantment spell, but then Ursula hits him with a fireball, so he falls to the ground in agony. After being healed yet again, Ein begins training to learn how to use magic without incantations, but since he doesn't have a magic-oriented class, his mana reserves are abysmally low, so he runs out of magic energy really quickly. Fortunately, whenever he is healed with the tears, it replenishes his mana and simultaneously increases his magic capacity a little, but he's going to have to keep practicing for a long time if he ever wants to master the technique. After half a month of magic training, Ein has learned how to cast mid-level magic and is now capable of shooting more than 1,000 fireballs simultaneously. With this, combined with his new skills and buffed appraisal ability, Ursula thinks Ein is finally ready to face another Death Bear. In all honesty, Ein is a little nervous about facing such a powerful monster on his own, but Ursula assures him that if he uses all the techniques she taught him, then he should easily be able to handle it. As Ein confronts the bear tries to slash him with its claws, but Ein appraises its movements and before it could hit him, he counters with a point-blank wing cutter spell. The spell does a lot of damage to the bear, but it ultimately isn't enough to kill it, so Ein begins firing fireballs and he keeps going until the bear falls over dead. That fight was way easier than Ein thought it would be, so he starts wondering if the bear was always this weak, but in reality he just became really strong. The story continues. We see now that the Death Bear is dead. Ein appraises it to learn its abilities, and after the splitting headache is over, Ursula tells him he should now possess enough strength to make it out of this dungeon on his own. But before he leaves, Ursula has a present to give him, but she's only doing this because Yuri asked her to. She says she's going to make a new sprite eye for Ein using the rest of the Yggdrasil tree's core. Ein doesn't think he deserves such a valuable gift, but Ursula yells at him, saying he's only going to be borrowing the core. She enchanted it, so if Ein ever dies, then the core will automatically return here, so he should just shut up and accept the gift already. Ein doesn't want to argue about it, so he sits down so Ursula can implant the spirit core in his eye, but after she's done, he doesn't feel that much different from before. Ursula tells him it will take time for his body to adapt his new spirit god eye, so he can't use its abilities right away. But even so, Ein is really grateful, so he turns to Yuri to thank her for the gift, but he can't find her anywhere. Just then, Yuri reappears in front of him, so Ein asks where she was, and she tells him she was in his eye a moment ago. With the World Tree core in Ein's eye, he now basically qualifies as the World Tree itself, so Yuri can freely enter and leave his eye whenever she wants. Yuri promises that she will be helpful to Ein since she can heal him whenever he gets injured, and Ein definitely likes the idea of getting to spend time with Yuri, but he asks Ursula if she's really okay with this. Ursula drop kicks him in the face and says she obviously doesn't want to entrust Yuri to a schmuck like him, but Yuri has been stuck here ever since the day she was born, so she has never gotten to see the world or had a friend. Ursula may not like him, but after all the time she has spent with him, she can at least tell that he's a good kid, so she wants him to go out there and show Yuri the world. Ein is honored that Ursula trusts him so much, so he swears to take care of Yuri no matter what, and Ursula is glad to hear that. Before Ein leaves, Ursula has a gift of her own that she wants to give him, so she asks him to stretch out his hand, and as he does so, she imbues it with some magic. Ein asks what this is, so she explains that it's an infinite storage spell, so as long as he has that mark, he can store any physical objects within it, and the first thing she wants him to store is this spirit sword she made for him. But before that, she stabs him in the eye. Ein falls to the floor in pain, so Yuri heals him, but just before his eye is completely healed, Ursula shows a philosopher's stone down his throat, and it replaces his right eye. Ein asks what that was all about, so Ursula explains that the philosopher's stone just established a permanent link between her and Ein, so now she can see everything he sees, so he had better not think about getting physical with Yuri. This is definitely going to be awkward for Ein, but that aside, he's all set, so it's about time he starts making his way out of the dungeon. Before they get going, Ein asks Yuri if there's anything she wants to do once they get to the surface, and after thinking about it for a bit, Yuri answers, saying she would like to see the rest of her family. Ein didn't know that Yuri had any family aside from Ursula, so Ursula explains that all the world trees that exist used to be part of one massive world tree. However, at one point the cores were split and hidden away in separate dungeons, so Yuri hasn't been able to see her siblings in years. In that case, Ein promises to travel the world with her so they can meet all the other world tree spirits. But to do that, first they have to get out of here. Ein heads out into the dungeon, but once he comes across a split in the path, he isn't sure which direction he should follow. All of a sudden, he hears Ursula's voice in his head, and she's telling him to take the path to the left. She already appraised an escape route for him with his eye, so as long as he follows her directions, he can't get lost. Also, there's a giant viper monster heading straight for him, so he had better get ready to fight it off. A few minutes later, Ein has killed the S-rank viper, and he's pretty proud of himself for being able to take it down so easily. Ursula tells Ein that she already used his eye to appraise the viper's abilities, but Ein wasn't ready for it, so he grabs his head in anticipation of the intense pain. However, to his surprise there is no pain, and that's thanks to Yuri because she healed him as soon as his head was about to start hurting. If Yuri can do that, then that means he won't have to suffer any more headaches when he appraises skills to learn them, so he thanks her for all her help. Ein eventually makes it to an ominous-looking door, and Ursula explains that this is where he will find the boss monster of this floor. Dungeons are pretty much living creatures that feed on the humans that die, and as such there is always a dungeon core and a dungeon boss to guard that core. The only way for Ein to get out of here is to defeat the dungeon boss and destroy the core, but Ein isn't sure if he has what it takes to do it. Defeating S-rank monsters is one thing, but a dungeon boss is supposedly several times stronger than any S-rank monster he has encountered so far. However, he refuses to back down because he is no longer the weak Ein who would helplessly run from death. He opens the doors to the boss room and finds the dungeon core on the other side of the room, but as he and Yuri are walking over to it, they trigger a summoning circle on the ground and cause a massive golem to spawn. This fight is going to be tough, so Ein asks Yuri to get back in his eyes so she doesn't get hurt, after which he begins charging at the golem. He dodges the golem's first strike with his speed boost, but he won't be able to dodge the second one, so instead he braces himself for impact with his superhuman strength skill. While he is touching the golem, he also activates the venom skill he got from the viper to dissolve a chunk of the golem's arm. The venom managed to do a lot of damage to the golem, but it wasn't enough to finish it off, so Ursula says she's giving special permission to use the ultimate spell she taught him. He should have just enough mana to pull it off now, and even if he collapses, Yuri can just heal him right away, so it shouldn't be a problem. Since nothing else has worked so far, Ein decided to use his ultimate spell after all and cast Nova Strike to hit the golem with a massive ball of pure energy. After hitting the golem with that spell, practically nothing is left of it, and surprisingly, Ein didn't even collapse from mana exhaustion. Yuri comes out to replenish Ein's lost mana and congratulates him for defeating the golem, but Ein knows he never could have done this without Yuri's help, so he thanks her. Yuri is really giddy about it, but Ursula is annoyed by how much Yuri likes him, so she tells Ein to hurry up and praise the golem's abilities already. Ein does so, and once he's done with that, Ursula tells him that there's one more thing he needs to appraise, so she asks him to go over to the dungeon core. Ein does as instructed, and while he's appraising the core, Ursula appears next to him, which comes as a major surprise since Ein thought she could leave the world tree. Ursula confirms that she is still bound to the world tree, but since the entire world tree's core is in Ein's eye, his body is practically the world tree now, so she can teleport within a certain vicinity of him. That aside, this dungeon core operates similarly to his spirit core, so Ursula says she can use it to level up Ein's spirit god eye if he wants. Ein readily agrees to the proposal, so Ursula takes the dungeon core and puts it in Ein's eye to level him up to level 2. She then tells Ein that he can level his eye up more by conquering different dungeons and absorbing their cores. The three of them then leave the boss room and the door closes behind them, so they can no longer return. Ursula assumes this must be because they defeated the boss and took the core, so the dungeon is sealing itself off so it can recover. The hole that Ein fell through is also probably sealed now, and that's a good thing, since it means there is no way for any more humans to stumble up on the world tree. So Ursula doesn't need to worry about protecting Yuri's tree body anymore, and the three of them are free to go on as many adventures as they want. Back in town, Zoid is still telling all the adventurers around about the tragedy that happened in the dungeon and how he nearly got eaten by hellhounds. And the only reason he actually managed to escape was because Ein selflessly volunteered to distract the hellhounds for him. This is a shameless lie, but since Zoid thinks Ein is dead, he is confident that no one will ever find out, because it's not like Ein is going to come back and expose him. A second later, Ein shows up behind Zoid, and he overheard Zoid's entire story, so he's here to expose him. He tells everyone that Zoid and Jolene paralyzed him and left him to die to the hounds. The people at the bar are enraged because they've been giving Zoid sympathy all this time, but he practically tried to murder Ein for his own sake. They start throwing things at Zoid, and they might have even lynched him for doing something so sinister to his own party member, but Ein stops them. He's still kind of mad at Zoid for what he did, but if not for that he would have never gotten the chance to meet Yuri or Ursula, so he's actually grateful that Zoid was such a scumbag. Now that he has confronted Zoid, Ein can finally move on, so he and the others head to a swamp dungeon near the capital. After clearing it, Ursula uses the dungeon core to level Ein's eye up, and with the upgrade, Ein is now able to read all types of writing. He's glad he leveled his eye up, but he's a little disappointed since he was hoping to find a world tree there. Ursula tells him it isn't going to be easy to find the world trees since a lot of effort was put into hiding them. Ein apologizes to Yuri since it might take a little longer than he anticipated before she gets to see her family, but Yuri says she doesn't mind since she's having fun. Just then, they hear the sound of a girl screaming and Yuri wants to help, so Ein runs out to save the girl. The girl's carriage had been attacked by monsters, so Ein slays them, and once all the monsters are dead, Yuri begins healing all the injured guards. Ein goes over to the girl and asks her if she's alright, but the second the girl saw Ein's face, the only words going through her head are, "Oh my god, that guy's hot." She jumps into Ein's arms, calling him her hero, and Ein doesn't know how to handle this situation, so he asks the guy over there for help. But Jasper is just the head of a trading company, so he has no control over what Princess Claudia does. A little while later, the princess brings Ein and the others to her mansion to properly thank them for saving her, and even though she's the third princess of this nation, she tells them there's no need to be so formal with her, and with that said, she jumps up to give Ein another big hug. However, before she could wrap her arms around him, Yuri steps in front of Claudia and refuses to let her get close to Ein. Claudia asks why Yuri is being so defensive, so Yuri blurts out that she doesn't want Claudia to touch Ein because she's Ein's wife. We then cut to Ein's face, and that right, there's the face of a man who didn't realize he was married until a second ago. However, even with Yuri's declaration, Claudia doesn't give up because she's fine with becoming Ein's second wife. While she and Yuri argue over Ein, Jasper comes over and says he has something to tell him. Ein asks what this is about, so Jasper tells him he wants to marry Ein. That's the third person today, but before Ein can respond, Jasper asks him to come down to the basement because there's something he wants to show him. Jasper is the head of the Geno Trading Company, and Ein already knows about the company since they are pretty much the richest and most famous trading company out there. Jasper leads everyone to his jewel room and explains that he has made it his life's mission to preserve all the prettiest jewels in the world, and today he found the prettiest jewel of all. He knows Ein's eye is made of a spirit core since he has done quite a bit of research on them, and he fell in love with Ein's eyes at first sight. He asks Ein to marry him so he can look into his eyes for the rest of his life, and Ein was initially going to decline, but Ursula pulls him aside and tells Ein to reconsider, because Jasper probably has information on the location of other spirit cores. Plus Jasper is rich, so if Ein married him, he would have access to all his resources. However, Ein isn't interested in being the gold digger, so he asks Jasper if they can just be friends instead, and Jasper says that's fine for now at least. Ein then asks Jasper if he has any information on the other spirit cores, and Jasper confirms this. But the locations are incredibly dangerous, so he hasn't been able to investigate. However, with Ein, a little danger shouldn't be much of a problem. The story continues. Thanks to the info they got from Jasper, Ein manages to locate a secret dungeon, and he's hopeful that one of Yuri's sisters might really be here, so he assures Yuri that he will do whatever it takes to make sure she reunites with her sibling. After entering the dungeon, Ein eventually comes to a dead end, and he doesn't know what to do since Jasper's instructions clearly said there should be something here. Ursula explains that there's a magic circle built into that wall over there, so touching it should teleport them into the dungeon. Ein does, as she says, and the second he touches the wall, he finds himself standing on a cliff that overlooks a jungle. He is surprised that a jungle could fit inside a dungeon, but Ursula tells him all this is just an illusion created by powerful magic. Just then, they hear a voice talking to them, and Yuri recognizes it as the voice of her little sister, Pina. Yuri wants to meet up with Pina, so she asks where she is, but Pina is all the way at the end of the dungeon, so she says they're going to have to clear the dungeon and make their way over to her. Ein thinks it'll be a major pain to have to clear the entire dungeon, so he asks Pina if she can just teleport them to the end or something, but Pina says she can't use that kind of magic. In that case, Ein accepts that he is just going to have to clear the entire dungeon, and Pina is surprised to see so much confidence coming from a mere human. She thinks Ein is just bluffing, so she warns him that she's set up traps all over the dungeon, so there's no guarantee that he won't get hurt if he continues. Ein understands that it's going to be dangerous, but he's sure he can handle it. Pina finds Ein interesting, but she doesn't trust him, and she's going to take great pleasure in watching him suffer while trying to make it through the dungeon. In fact, there's a pit right in front of Ein, and Pina is sure he won't notice it and will fall in. However, Ein does notice it and easily jumps over the trap. He then continues dodging all the other traps Pina laid out, and Pina is starting to get pissed because she put a lot of work into making those. Ein doesn't get why she's mad, since it's not like he's going to intentionally fall for a trap that he can avoid, but Yuri explains that Pina has always liked making innocent pranks for people to enjoy. Ein doesn't think there's anything innocent about Pina's hobby, since any one of these traps could definitely kill someone. Pina interrupts Ein because she may be sadistic, but she's not evil. She designed the dungeons to automatically kick people out once they get themselves into mortal danger, so her traps have never killed anyone, but they can still make you suffer, so she tells Ein she's going to send out some really tough monsters to deal with him. The first monster soon approaches Ein, and it's an S-rank or implant monster. The monster sprays Ein with a gas, and Pina mockingly informs him that that was sleeping gas, so he's going to pass out any second now. However, Ein doesn't feel even slightly sleepy because he got a skill that grants him resistance to all status effects. Pina can't believe it, so she throws a temper tantrum because Ein is ruining the fun of her dungeon. Ein understands why she's so frustrated with him taking the dungeon on so easily, but he's doing this for Yuri's sake, so he pulls out his sword and cuts the Elrond down. He then appraises the monster. While he's distracted, something hits him in the head. It looks like another monster is attacking him from the shadows, but I can't see anything. Ursula assumes the monster must be using some kind of stealth skill to stay hidden, but even if I can't see them, it doesn't matter since he has an ability that negates all ambush attacks. Additionally, he has a separate ability that negates regular attacks when he's standing still, so he's practically invincible. Pina can't believe what she's hearing, but even if her stealth monsters can't do any damage to Ein, he can't defeat them and he can't see them. That may be true, but Ein has special eyes, so after a few moments, he appraises the location of the monsters and uses a gravity spell to take them out. Pina is getting really upset because all her hard work is going to waste, but she eventually picks herself back up, and with a ton of confidence, she declares that there's no way Ein will be able to kill her next monsters. She sends out Arachne and a centaur, but 3 seconds later, Ein kills them like it's nothing. Pina officially gives up after seeing that, and she's convinced that Ein isn't a human after all, because no human should be capable of killing 2 S-rank monsters at the same time. Meanwhile, Zoid's life as an adventurer practically fell apart after Ein exposed him. As he walks back into the guild, all the adventurers start giving him the side-eye because they all know about him using Ein as bait. While there, Zoid happens to run into Jolene, and he's glad because there's no way she can look down on him for what he did when she was in on it. But he was wrong. Jolene switched sides the second Zoid became an outcast, and she even turns on the waterworks to make people believe she did nothing wrong. Zoid tells her to stop lying and reminds everyone that she was the one who cast the spell to paralyze Ein, but Jolene just says she had no choice because Zoid threatened her. And that's all it took for the blame to be placed firmly on Zoid's shoulders. Zoid is kicked out of the guild and reminded that no adventurer would ever want to team up with the likes of him again. Zoid doesn't understand why everyone is treating him like an outcast all of a sudden, because he's sure any one of them would have left Ein as bait if they were surrounded by wolves. He blames Ein for this whole mess, because if Ein had just let himself die, then Zoid's secret would never have come out. Now Zoid believes that the only way he can restore his reputation is to tackle a difficult dungeon all on his own and prove to everyone that he's strong. He decides to take on a C-rank quest that happens to be in the same dungeon Ein went into. Normally a C-rank mission would be impossible for him, but he can do it. Just then he hears a sound coming from behind him, so he gets scared, but it turns out to be nothing. He is relieved since he thought he might be in serious danger for a second there, but then he accidentally touches the wall that teleports him into the secret dungeon, and now he's definitely in danger. He realizes this must be a secret dungeon, and if that's the case, then it must have strong monsters inside, but Zoid is riding high on his self-confidence to be sure he can handle whatever comes his way. At least that's what he thinks, but after taking 2 steps in, he falls for a pit trap and is about to die. Luckily for him, Pina wasn't lying when she said she doesn't like killing people, so Zoid gets teleported back outside and hears an announcement from Pina saying he can try again if he wants. After realizing he can't die in the dungeon, Zoid thinks this might be his chance to prove himself since he can just keep trying over and over until he gets good enough to clear the dungeon. He heads back in and he keeps falling for trap after trap, until eventually he is able to make it to a clear in the forest. However, things don't get much better for him because he ends up coming face to face with a giant S-rank lizard monster, and he immediately gets badly injured. Pina finds this amusing, but she still doesn't want anyone to die in her dungeon, so she tells Zoid she can teleport him out now if he wants. Zoid refuses to give up, but then he gets his arm squished, so he screams out in so much pain that he forgets to say I give up. The lizard is about to attack him again, but before it does, Ein appears in front of him and kills the lizard in one blow. Zoid is amazed that someone could kill an S-rank monster so easily, but he doesn't realize that the person who just saved him is Ein. When they both look at each other, Ein asks Zoid what he's doing here and Zoid asks the same thing. Ein explains that he's here because he plans to clear this dungeon and Zoid is kind of in the way right now, so as much as he doesn't like the guy, he asks Fury to heal his arm and then makes him faint so Pina can teleport him out of the dungeon. Ein then moves on and eventually comes across the boss's room door, so Pina tells him he's going to have to defeat the boss if he wanted to get to her. Ein is confused since he thought defeating the dungeon boss would seal the dungeon off, but that's not the case. Ursula tells him that as long as he leaves the dungeon core intact, the dungeon will be able to recover, and since he has confirmation that the dungeon will be fine, he heads inside to take on the boss. However, as he enters, he doesn't see a boss monster anywhere. Just then, the ground begins to shake beneath his feet, so Ein uses his flight skill to get away, and it is revealed that the monster is a giant tortoise. Ein freaks out a little because that thing is massive, but panicking won't help defeat it, so Ein shoots a flurry of fireballs at it. However, when the smoke clears, no damage has been done to the tortoise. The tortoise then returns fire and shoots a water ball at Ein, so he counters by parrying it back at the tortoise. But again, this does absolutely no damage to it. Ein is running out of ideas here because none of his attacks have been effective so far. However, when he takes a closer look, he notices that there's damage on the ground from his fireballs as well as the water bullet, even though he's sure those attacks hit the tortoise directly. He now understands what's going on here, so he lands on the ground and lets the tortoise stomp on him to prove his theory. Just as unexpected, the tortoise's stomp does no damage to him because the giant tortoise's body was just an illusion. And now that it has been established that the giant tortoise is an illusion, Ein casts a spell to dispel the illusion, revealing the true boss monster to be this tiny turd. Ursula is impressed with Ein since even she couldn't tell that the monster was an illusion. But as Ein appraises the baby tortoise, she notices something unbelievable about the tortoise, and she's so surprised she can hardly speak. Ein doesn't understand what Ursula is saying, but even if this little guy is the dungeon boss, Ein doesn't want to have to kill it, so he asks Pina to just admit defeat. Pina refuses and says she hasn't lost until Ein kills the tortoise, so Ein asks her she's really going to make him kill such an adorable little guy. Pina feels bad, so she admits defeat and says they can enter her room, and once they are inside, Yuri runs into Pina's arms and starts swinging her around until Pina gets dizzy. She apologizes for being so rough, but she was just so excited to see Pina again. Pina then turns to Ein, and she's still holding a bit of a grudge against him for beating her dungeon so easily, but Yuri tells her not to be mad at Ein because he's a really nice person. After hearing Yuri defend unlike that, Pina realizes Yuri must be in love with him, so she starts teasing her about it and Yuri gets embarrassed, but she can't really deny it. Now that Yuri and Pina have had their reunion, Pina says she has a favor to ask. She wants to travel with Ein, and she even offers to give him her spirit core if he agrees to let her tag along. Yuri seems really excited by the idea, so she asks Ein if he's okay with it, and he doesn't see a problem with it, so everyone is in agreement. Just then, the little tortoise jumps off Ein's shoulder and transforms into a girl. She introduces herself as Pina's guardian, Kuroheim, the daughter of the heavenly beast tortoise. And Kuro must be pretty high-ranked among the guardians for Ursula to be panicking like she just ran into her drill surgeon. Ein is still in disbelief that there's someone out there who can make Ursula act so polite. Since Kuro is Pina's guardian, Ein has to ask her for permission to take Pina with him, and Kuro is all for the idea but only on one condition. She wants to come along too. She hands Ein a philosopher's stone, and if he adds this to his eye along with Pina's spirit core, then they will both be able to go with him. Also, Kuro's ability allows her to create barriers, so she's sure she will be useful to Ein. Meanwhile, Zoid finally wakes up outside the dungeon, and he realizes that the only reason he's alive right now is because the same Ein that he tormented for so many years chose to save him. He then rolls over and starts crying over how much of a failure he has become. The story continues. We see Jasper accompanies Ein to the local adventurers guild, because Ein wants to sell some of the loot he got from the dungeon, and having Jasper with him will make the whole process a lot easier. Everyone already recognizes Jasper as an extremely wealthy merchant, but they have no idea who Ein is. Jasper tells the receptionist that Ein is here to sell some of the loot he got from a dungeon, and immediately after Jasper wants to buy all those items. The receptionist says she's more than happy to help, so she asks Ein to hand her his guild card, but as he does so she is shocked to find out that Ein is an F rank appraiser. After seeing that, she becomes belligerent and says she doubts that an F rank appraiser like Ein could defeat any monsters at all, and all the other adventurers begin mocking him as well. But Jasper tells Ein to just show them the items he has. Ein then opens his storage to reveal a mountain of S-rank monster parts. But even after seeing all the high-level loot Ein has, adventurers in the guild assume Ein must have stolen it all from someone else, since there's no way he could have killed all those monsters on his own. This is exactly why Ein wanted to avoid coming to the guild, because people always look down on him for being a low common appraiser. However, there's someone here who isn't as shallow as the rest. The guildmaster Megan comes out of her office and condemns all the adventurers for mocking someone they never met just because of his skill class. The receptionist uses an appraisal device to scan the items Ein brought, and to her surprise it really is all genuine, and Jasper adds to this by saying he can personally confirm that Ein is strong enough to defeat all these monsters on his own. The receptionist realizes she messed up really bad by making fun of Ein, so she sincerely apologizes. Megan also apologizes on her behalf and said she'll give the receptionist a stern talking to about her behavior later. Even though a person's class is decided at birth, Megan is glad to see that there are people out there like Ein who refuse to be limited by it, and Ein is glad that there are people like Megan who don't judge him based off his class alone. Megan has really taken a liking to Ein, so she's sure the two of them will meet again in the near future. But for now she has work to do, so she leaves Ein to finish up his business here. The receptionist asks Ein to wait in the waiting room while she processes all his items, but Ein actually has a lot more stuff to sell since he cleared the entire secret dungeon. Upon hearing that Ein cleared his secret dungeon by himself, all the people who mocked him start trying to get close to ask him for details about it, but Ein doesn't like all this attention, so he ends up running away. A little while later Ein takes a dip in the bath to relax after all that stress. But while he's enjoying his soak, Yuri suddenly appears beside him. It takes a moment for it to register, but when it finally clicks that she's in the bath with him, he totally freaks out. He swims away from her in a panic, but Yuri doesn't understand why he's being so distant since they are always together. Pina then shows up as well and begins joking that Ein was overcome with lust after seeing Yuri's naked body, but Ein denies it. In the first place, Yuri and Pina shouldn't be here since this is the men's bath, but Pina reminds him that she and Yuri are spirits, so they don't have to follow human rules. She then asks if he is shy because he's having pervy thoughts about Yuri, but he once again denies it and tries to prove that his mind is pure by maintaining eye contact with Yuri. But then his eyes drift down to her double Ds and his mind goes blank from there. Ursula then appears and she doesn't take kindly to Ein staring at Yuri's body, so she threatens to eviscerate him with the highest magic she can muster if he dares to touch Yuri. Yuri begs Ursula to stop because she wasn't bothered by Ein looking at her, but upon hearing this Ursula thinks Ein might have already done something to Yuri, so she prepares to blow him up anyway, and Yuri warns Ein to run because Ursula might actually do it, and Pima's just over here enjoying the show. Once the mayhem settles down, Ein gets out of the bath and sits down at a table so he doesn't have to deal with Ursula trying to kill him anymore. Kuroheim is there as well, but thankfully she behaved normal, so he can just sit and chat. Kuroheim thinks it's wonderful how lively everyone is since Pina is having more fun than ever before. Pina is like a daughter Kuroheim since as a guardian she created Pina's spirit core and eventually the core developed a personality. In addition to Yuri and Pina, Ein recalls that there should be 6 others out there, but Kuroheim tells him that there are actually 7. Ein is confused since he heard that the first egg drizzle tree withered years ago, but while that may be the case, Kuroheim informs him that the first tree's spirit core Echidna is still out there, although no one knows where she is. The same goes for the other tree spirits, so Ein thinks it is going to be difficult to find them all, but that doesn't mean he's going to give up because his end goal is to make Yuri happy and reunite her with her family. The next day, Megan comes to Jasper's mansion looking for Ein because she has a special request to ask of him. Ein asks why she wants him specifically since she could have asked anyone else from the guild, but this mission is something only Ein can accomplish. She asks him if he knows anything about the behemoth, but Ein has never heard of it before, so she explains that it is one of the legendary dragons that was summoned by the demon lord Micturian. After Micturian was sealed, the dragon went into hiding, but recently it has reappeared, and it is strangely only attacking merchants that pass through the area. That is why Megan is here to officially give Ein the SS rank quest of defeating the behemoth. The quest is incredibly dangerous and may very well cost Ein his life, so Megan would understand if he refuses, but before she even finishes speaking, Ein says he will do it. He heads out into the desert where the behemoth was last spotted, and Ursula appraises its location, so she knows exactly where it is. However, before Ein engages, she warns him that the behemoth can absorb magic attacks, and it is also capable of using air to launch attacks that can cut space itself. Ein takes note of the warning, but the behemoth's ability to absorb magic means Ein is going to have to rely on attacking it with his sword instead. But before any of that, Ein needs to get the behemoth's attention somehow because it is sleeping deep beneath the sand. He decides to use a nova to destroy a large chunk of the ground to force the behemoth up to the surface, and it is not happy about being disturbed. In Behemoth's long life, it has never once tasted defeat, as it was personally created by the Demon Lord to be incredibly strong. It has laid waste to entire armies of humans, and not once has it ever found a worthy opponent to challenge him, so he grew bored of fighting at some point. Ein may not look all that impressive, but Behemoth acknowledges that he has access to some pretty powerful magic, but it's not like magic is going to work against Behemoth anyway. Behemoth asked Ein who he used to think he can challenge the mighty Behemoth, so Ein introduces himself as a regular man who has come to slay him. Behemoth thinks this must be some kind of joke since there's no way a frail human like Ein would ever be able to defeat him, but Ein seems pretty confident, so Behemoth decides to humor him. He tells Ein that he was created by the Demon Lord to be the most powerful beast, but if Behemoth is the best the Demon Lord could make, then the Demon Lord must have been pretty weak. Behemoth is enraged by Ein's insult, so he fires several helix bullets at him, but Ein is quick enough to run out of the way before he is hit. However, since Behemoth is an earth dragon, he tells Ein there's no escaping him while they are in a field of sand. He stomps on the ground, creating a sand trap around Ein, so Ein uses his acceleration skill to speed up and close in on Behemoth. Once he's close enough, he proceeds to slice through Behemoth's arm, and Behemoth is starting to realize that Ein may be a real threat, so he switches tactics and dives into the sand. While Behemoth is swimming through the sand, he is completely undetectable from the surface, so Ein has no idea where the next attack will come from, and the second he heats his guard down, Behemoth jumps up from beneath him and swallows Ein whole. Behemoth laughs, thinking he has proved his superiority over the foolish even who challenged him, but it looks like he's celebrated too soon because in the next moment his face explodes. He has no idea how this could have happened, but he realizes he was wrong about Ein being weak, and he's not even mad about losing because Ein was a worthy opponent. However, before he finally dies, he asks Ein to explain how he managed to pull it off. Ein explains that he simply realized that Behemoth's magic absorption only worked on the outer part of his body, so he just activated high-level magic while he was inside Behemoth's mouth. However, if that's what Ein did, Behemoth asks how he didn't get caught up in the blast as well, but Ein simply put up a barrier to protect himself from the blast. Behemoth realizes he had grown arrogance from all his years of easy victories, but even as life fades from what's left of his body, he is content with everything that happened and accepts his defeat. Ein kind of feels bad for Behemoth because he only killed people because the Demon Lord made him that way, but at the end of the day he still killed a lot of people, so Ein couldn't just let him live, and Ursula tells him to just hurry up and appraise his skills. Now that all the fighting is over, everyone comes out to congratulate Ein on his victory. Once Ein returns, he is called to the royal palace for some reason, and while waiting the princess comes out to see him. She apologizes for not visiting him more often even though she's his second wife, but Ein reminds her that they are not actually married. She chooses to ignore what he said and informs Ein that he was invited here because her father wants to meet with him. And speaking of her father, he just arrived. Ein is intimidated by the king and his menacing demeanor, so he starts trying to be polite, but the king is actually a really chill dude, so he tells Ein he doesn't have to worry about formalities. The two of them sit down, and King thanks for agreeing to this meeting because he really wanted to meet him in person. He heard from Megan that Ein defeated the ancient dragon Behemoth, and as the king of this land it is his duty to properly reward him, but Ein says he doesn't need a reward. Even so, the Behemoth wasn't Ein's only heroic deed, as he also saved the princess when her carriage was attacked, so as her father he has to thank him for that. Ein tells him that if he's going to thank someone then it should be Yuri, since he never could have become as strong as he is now without her help. In that case, the king also thanks Yuri, but she's still shy about talking to people who aren't Ein, so Yuri hides behind him. The king says he is able to judge a person's character fairly accurately, and he can tell that Ein is someone who wouldn't let power go to his head. He has other things to take care of, so he will have to end their meeting here for today, but before he leaves he says he has a gift to give Ein. He hands Ein a watch with a royal family crest engraved on it, and with this Ein will be able to go pretty much anywhere in the kingdom completely unimpeded. Ein is hesitant to accept something with such value, but it would help him explore areas that would normally be off limits so he can find Yuri's family, so he graciously accepts the gift. News of Ein defeating the Behemoth begins to spread all over the kingdom, so his popularity is reaching new heights. And at the same time, Zoid is reaching new lows as he is now regarded as trash by everyone he meets. What infuriates him the most is the fact that he has been hearing about Ein's accomplishments non-stop when not long ago he was stronger than Ein. He thinks everything would have been much better if Ein had just remained a weakling, or if he didn't exist at all, and all of a sudden, he hears the voice of a woman saying she can help him. She introduces herself as a tree spirit and tells him her name is Echidna. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.